Growing up, my parents were my heroes. Honestly, they weren't perfect, but to me, they might as well have been. My dad was steady as a rock, always calm, always honest. He taught me that a man's word was his bond, something you never broke, no matter what. My mom, she was the glue that held everything together. Loyalty was her middle name, and everyone in our small neighborhood knew that. They weren't the flashy type, just hardworking, middle-class folks living quietly on the outskirts of Chicago. Their marriage was one of those rare examples where you could actually believe in "till death do us part." I watched them closely, learning what love and commitment really looked like. Naturally, I figured my life would follow their blueprint. It seemed simple enough. Grow up, find someone good, and build a family based on trust. And when I met Sarah in my late 20s, I genuinely believed I was on the right path. She was vibrant, ambitious, and beautiful, the kind of woman who instantly turns heads when she walks into a room. But more importantly, she seemed to value honesty as much as I did. We clicked right from the start. Conversations flowed easily. Laughter came naturally. Sarah worked as an HR manager for a big corporation downtown. Her job demanded a lot, but I respected her drive. As for me, I found my calling in construction engineering. I liked the tangible results of my work, seeing buildings rise, and knowing I had a hand in creating something solid. We got married 3 years after we met. I still remember the look on Sarah's face as she walked down the aisle, eyes bright, smile, radiant. That day, standing in front of friends and family, I truly believed we were unbreakable. We exchanged vows, promising honesty, fidelity, and unwavering love. I meant every word. After our wedding, we settled down in a modest but charming house in a peaceful suburb just outside Chicago. Life fell into a comfortable rhythm. I'd wake up early, head out to construction sites, come home tired but content. Sarah balanced her demanding job and still managed to keep things lively at home. On weekends, we'd visit local parks, grab brunch at our favorite diner, or just lounge around binge-watching TV shows. From the outside looking in, we probably seemed like the picture-perfect couple. Friends joked that we were relationship goals, and honestly, it felt good hearing that. I liked thinking we had figured it out, how to be happy, stable, and in love. But here's the thing about reality. It has a way of sneaking up on you. You think you've got it all figured out, and suddenly, a crack appears. At first, it's so tiny you barely notice it. But cracks don't stay small forever. One evening, as I stood in our backyard grilling burgers and sipping a beer, I watched Sarah inside, her phone pressed to her ear. Something about the way she laughed caught my attention. It wasn't the usual casual laugh, it was softer, almost shy. She didn't know I was watching, but I felt this sudden tightening in my chest. "You're being paranoid," I whispered to myself, shaking it off. I flipped the burgers and took another swig of beer, trying to ignore the uncomfortable feeling. But looking back now, that moment was the first signal, the quiet warning that our perfect life wasn't as unshakable as I'd believed. My gut was already telling me something I wasn't ready to hear. See, the ideals I'd grown up believing in, the ones I'd built my entire life around, were about to be tested in ways I could never imagine. And the family values that once felt so strong, they were about to collide head-on with the harsh reality of human nature. I didn't know it yet, standing there in our backyard, watching my wife smile at someone on the phone. But the life I thought was so secure was slowly starting to unravel. And the worst part was, I wasn't prepared for any of it. The day everything began to change, I was outside washing my truck. It was one of those crisp, sunny Saturday mornings, the kind Chicago is famous for in early fall. Washing my truck was like therapy for mess, scrubbing away the dirt, making it look brand new, as if I could do the same with my thoughts. I was lost in the rhythm of the hose and sponge when I heard tires screeching up the driveway. I looked up sharply. My mother-in-law Elaine's silver sedan stopped abruptly, nearly clipping our mailbox. Her door flew open, and she stumbled out, visibly shaken. Mascara streaked down her cheeks. "Elaine?" I called out, rushing to meet her. She practically fell into my arms, sobbing uncontrollably. "Oh, Michael, it's George again," she cried, burying her face in my chest. My heart sank. This wasn't the first time we'd dealt with George's infidelity, but each time felt just as shocking. I guided Elaine inside gently and helped her sit at our kitchen table. Her shoulders trembled as she tried to gather herself. "Sarah," I called upstairs, trying to keep my voice steady. "Your mom's here. Come down." Sarah quickly appeared, worry etched across her face. "Mom, what's wrong?" Elaine took a shaky breath. "Your father. He's cheated again. Another woman, Sarah. I don't think I can handle this anymore. Sarah glanced at me briefly, her expression unreadable, then turned back to Elaine. Mom, you know Dad loves you. He's just being a man. I hate it too, but maybe it's just in their nature. I froze. Her words echoed in my ears. Just in their nature. I couldn't believe she was saying this. Her casual acceptance hit me like ice water. I had always thought Sarah saw the world like I did, black and white, right and wrong. But now, hearing her rationalize her father's betrayal sent chills down my spine. I poured Elaine some tea, giving myself a moment to regain composure. Sarah continued soothing her mother, telling her this was normal, that many men struggled to be faithful, that maybe George would change eventually. Listening to her made my stomach turn. Sarah? I finally interrupted softly. You can't seriously believe it's okay to cheat just because it's their nature. She looked at me, her blue eyes sharp and defensive. Michael, I don't think it's okay, but it's reality. Men are different from women. Maybe we're not meant to be monogamous forever. I stared at her, speechless. Elaine sobbed quietly, lost in her own pain, while my wife sat next to her, calmly rationalizing infidelity. It was as if a veil had been lifted, revealing a side of Sarah I'd never known existed. Maybe if Mom had accepted this sooner, it wouldn't have hurt so much each time, Sarah added softly, almost to herself. I felt a sickening knot forming inside me. Was Sarah really so casual about this? If she could forgive her father so easily, what did that mean for us? For her? Later that evening, Sarah asked me to talk with George, maybe help him see reason. Reluctantly, I agreed, but only for Elaine's sake. Out on the patio, George and I grilled steaks in awkward silence. He fumbled with the tongs, clearly uncomfortable. Look, Mike, he finally said, avoiding eye contact. I didn't mean for Elaine to find out. I never wanted to hurt her. I clenched my jaw, biting back anger. If you didn't want to hurt her, George, you shouldn't have cheated. That's pretty simple. He sighed, defeated. You're a good man, Mike. I admire your values. I used to believe in that too. But life isn't always black and white. Maybe not, I replied, keeping my voice steady. But cheating is still a choice. He nodded weakly, staring down at the grill as smoke drifted up between us. Neither of us said much else after that. Later, when George and Elaine left, I felt hollow. Sarah tried to hug me, whispering reassurances that things would be okay. But her earlier words haunted me. I pulled away gently, needing space. Michael, please don't take this personally, she pleaded softly. This isn't about us. But how could it not be? If she saw her father's cheating as somehow natural or acceptable, what stopped her from applying that same logic to herself? Had I misunderstood her all along? That night, I lay awake in bed, listening to Sarah's gentle breathing beside me, troubled thoughts racing through my mind. My entire vision of our future was starting to shift, cracking at the edges. I had built my life around the belief that trust and fidelity were fundamental truths. But now, it felt like my foundation was trembling beneath my feet. The family crisis hadn't just affected Elaine and George, it had forced me to confront something disturbing about my own marriage. And as I stared into the darkness, I couldn't shake the creeping fear that Sarah and I were far more different than I ever realized. After the whole ordeal with George and Elaine, things never really settled back into place. Sure, we returned to our usual routine, but there was a subtle tension in the air. It lingered like an unwelcome guest, something you couldn't quite name, but could definitely feel. I tried to push my worries aside, reminding myself that Sarah and I were different. But once you've seen a crack, it's impossible not to keep glancing back, waiting for it to widen. It was as if George's betrayal had planted a seed of doubt, slowly taking root inside me. Over the next few weeks, I began to notice little things about Sarah that I'd never paid attention to before. She started staying late at work more frequently, blaming it on new projects. Her phone was suddenly always face down on the table, screen hidden. When I asked about it, she'd smile sweetly and shrug, dismissing my concern. It's just habit, she'd say casually, but my gut tightened every time. One evening, I came home earlier than usual. Sarah wasn't expecting me, and as I stepped quietly into the hallway, I overheard a soft laugh from our bedroom. Curious, I approached the door, which was slightly ajar. Sarah was standing by the window, phone pressed to her ear, smiling in a way I'd rarely seen. No, you're hilarious, she whispered playfully, her tone intimate, unlike the voice she used with coworkers or friends. My pulse quickened, a sick feeling washing over me. She turned suddenly, noticing me in the doorway, Her eyes widened for just a second before quickly regaining composure. "Michael, you scared me," she laughed nervously. "How long have you been standing there?" I forced a smile. "Not long. Who are you talking to?" She waved her hand dismissively. "Just someone from work, nothing important. You know, the usual office gossip." But her eyes didn't meet mine. Instead, they darted away briefly, and that small hesitation spoke louder than any words. I nodded slowly, pretending to accept her explanation, but deep down, unease gnawed at me. After that day, I couldn't shake the sense that something had changed between us. Sarah became slightly more distant. Her hugs felt perfunctory, her kisses quick and distracted. We still had dinner together every night, but conversations grew superficial, careful. She never shared details of her workday anymore, and I stopped asking. At night, I'd lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying her words about George. Maybe we're not meant to be monogamous forever. The phrase echoed endlessly in my head, becoming a kind of dark mantra. Could she really believe that? Was she rationalizing her own desires, preparing the ground for a future confession? One rainy Saturday afternoon, I caught myself driving aimlessly through the suburbs, passing parks where we'd walked hand in hand, restaurants where we'd laughed over dinner, places now tainted with suspicion. I couldn't escape the feeling that Sarah was slipping away, inch by painful inch. Back home, the phone buzzed on the kitchen counter while Sarah was in the shower. Without thinking, I glanced down at the screen. A notification flashed up. Simple text, "Miss you already." My heart skipped a beat. I reached out instinctively, intending to read more, but I stopped myself at the last second. Breathing heavily, I pulled my hand away. Was I really that guy now? Snooping through my wife's messages, doubting every move she made? When Sarah stepped out of the bathroom, her hair wet, towel wrapped around her, she smiled warmly. But all I saw was a stranger wearing my wife's face. "You okay, babe?" she asked softly, sensing my distress. "Yeah, just tired," I lied, forcing a weak smile. She came closer, gently touching my cheek. "I'm here if you need me, Michael." Her words, meant to reassure, only twisted the knife deeper. I wanted desperately to believe her, but every sign, every gesture, every hidden message said otherwise. Late that night, unable to sleep, I sat alone in the dimly lit living room, the silence heavy around me. My parents' relationship had taught me to believe in the sanctity of marriage, that honesty and loyalty were absolute truths. But now I was starting to think that maybe the world wasn't as clear-cut as I'd always believed. George had cheated repeatedly. Elaine had forgiven him repeatedly. And Sarah seemed to think this was somehow normal, acceptable even. Could it be that cheating wasn't just a choice, but something ingrained, passed down through generations like a twisted family legacy? I shook my head bitterly. No, I refused to accept that. But even as I fought against the thought, another more painful realization surfaced. Maybe Sarah wasn't who I thought she was. Maybe, just maybe, she'd always been someone else, someone waiting quietly beneath the surface, ready to break free. And now, looking into the darkness, feeling more alone than ever, I wondered how long it would be before our marriage faced its own crisis zone even bigger than Elaine and George's. It was a Tuesday evening, colder than usual for mid-October. The leaves had already turned, covering our driveway in shades of orange and brown. I pulled into the garage, tired after a long day supervising the construction of a new office building downtown. Sarah's car wasn't home yet, so I figured she was working late again. Stepping inside, I tossed my keys onto the counter and glanced at the clock. Almost 8. I made myself a sandwich, ate in silence, and then headed upstairs. Sarah had left her tablet charging on the nightstand, and as I got undressed, a notification flashed on its screen. At first, I ignored it, but it buzzed again, a second notification. Without thinking much, I picked it up, planning only to silence it. But as my eyes skimmed over the preview of the messages, my blood ran cold. "Bill, today was amazing. Can't wait until next time." "Sarah, me neither. It's getting harder to pretend at home." My heart slammed against my ribs, panic flooding through me. My vision blurred briefly as disbelief gave way to a sickening sense of realization. I gripped the tablet tighter, scrolling through the conversation, desperate to understand how deep this betrayal went. The messages went back months. Late-night meetups, stolen moments when I was out of town or stuck at work. Sarah's words painted a picture of someone deeply involved, emotionally and physically, with another man. And not just anyone, Bill. Our neighbor, the guy who had borrowed my tools, drank beers with me on weekends, whose wife, Kate, Sarah, had brunch with regularly. My legs gave out, and I sank onto the bed, shaking. How could I have been so blind? I must have sat there for hours, staring blankly at the floor, until the front door opened downstairs. Sarah's footsteps echoed softly as she made her way up. I quickly set the tablet down, forcing myself to breathe. She walked into the bedroom, offering a tired smile. "Long day," she sighed, slipping off her heels. "You okay?" My jaw tightened, but I forced out, "Yeah, just tired too." Sarah nodded absently, not noticing my clenched fists or rigid posture. She went to the bathroom, humming softly, unaware of the storm raging inside me. I lay awake all night, my thoughts spiraling. I replayed every moment with Bill in my head: barbecues, casual conversations, joking about neighborhood gossip. The betrayal cut deeper because I knew him, trusted them both. The next day, I called in sick, unable to face work. After Sarah left, I sat alone in the empty house, numb. I knew confronting her now would lead to an ugly battle, and I wasn't ready. I needed time to think, to prepare for the worst. I found myself driving aimlessly around our suburb, eventually pulling up across from Bill and Kate's home. It looked so normal, so innocent. Just another pleasant house on our quiet street, with flower beds neatly tended and a welcome mat at the front door. But behind that facade, our lives had been irrevocably damaged. Later, as I sat in the darkened living room, my phone buzzed. It was Sarah, texting to say she'd be late again. A wave of bitterness rose inside me, knowing exactly why. She was with him. I stared at her message, tempted to reply with anger or accusation, but stopped myself. I couldn't act rashly. I needed proof, needed to be certain there could be no excuses, no denials. That night, I downloaded everything I could from her tablet, collecting messages, timestamps, everything to ensure she couldn't lie her way out. Each new revelation felt like another blow, but somehow, facing the truth head-on was easier than living in denial. When Sarah finally came home, I pretended to be asleep. She crawled quietly into bed beside me, unaware that the man lying inches away from her now knew everything. As dawn broke through our window, casting weak sunlight across our bedroom floor, I knew I had to make a decision. The marriage I'd built my life around had been shattered. Sarah had chosen her path, and now it was my turn to choose mine. I realized with a heavy heart that the ideals I'd always believed in loyalty, honesty, trust had been broken, not by some stranger, but by the person I'd loved most. The thought was almost unbearable, but it was the reality I now had to face. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and prepared myself for the storm ahead. 3 days later, I found myself parked outside the Sunrise Motel off Route 53, my heart pounding, fingers trembling against the steering wheel. I'd been following Sarah discreetly, something I never imagined I'd do, but now there was no turning back. I spotted her car parked toward the back of the lot, next to Bill's blue Chevy pickup. Seeing their vehicles side by side, unmistakable proof of their deception, sent a wave of rage crashing through me. For a moment, I hesitated, gripping the wheel tighter, unsure what I'd do once I faced them. But my anger won out, propelling me forward. I stepped out into the chilly afternoon, my breathing shallow, adrenaline coursing through me. Room 114. The number burned itself into my memory. Approaching the door, I felt detached, as if watching myself from above. Without hesitation, I pounded my fist against the cheap wood, the sound reverberating in my ears. Inside, I heard startled whispers, hurried movements. The door cracked open cautiously, revealing Bill, half-dressed, panic etched across his face. "Michael," he stammered, eyes wide. "Listen, I can." I shoved the door open, my vision clouded with fury. Behind him, Sarah sat frozen on the bed, sheets clutched around her, guilt unmistakable in her expression. "You son of a bitch!" I shouted, lunging forward and grabbing Bill by his shirt. He stumbled back, trying to shield himself, but I was beyond reason. My fist connected with his jaw, sending him sprawling onto the thin, faded carpet. Sarah screamed, scrambling from the bed, grabbing at my arms desperately. "Michael, stop, please," she begged, her voice cracking. "It's not what you think." I spun around, rage boiling inside me. "Not what I think?" I roared. "You're in a damn motel room with our neighbor. How stupid do you think I am, Sarah?" Bill groaned on the floor, blood trickling from his lip. He pushed himself upright, eyes darting between Sarah and me. Listen, man, this isn't personal. It's my marriage, Bill. It couldn't be more personal. I spat, my fists clenched. In a desperate move, Bill lunged toward me, trying to tackle me down. We crashed into the flimsy nightstand, sending a lamp shattering to the floor. I pushed him away, and he tripped backward, hitting his head sharply against the edge of the dresser. His body slumped to the ground, unconscious. "Oh my God," Sarah whispered, hands covering her mouth, horror-stricken. She rushed toward him, crouching beside his limp form. I stood there, chest heaving, suddenly feeling the full weight of what had happened. My knuckles throbbed painfully, blood smeared on them. The room fell silent except for Sarah's panicked breathing. Minutes later, sirens wailed outside. Blue and red lights flashed through the cheap curtains. I barely noticed as officers burst into the room, guns drawn, shouting commands. I raised my hands slowly, numb and detached. Everything moved in slow-motion cuffs, tightening around my wrists, officers guiding me roughly out of the room. "Michael," Sarah cried from behind me. "I'm so sorry. Please, this was a mistake, I swear." Her words faded as I was pushed into the back seat of the squad car. Sitting there, alone in the confined space, reality crashed down on me. My marriage, my future, my entire life, it was all in ruin. At the police station, they held me in a sterile, cold interrogation room. Hours dragged on. Eventually, Sarah arrived, escorted by an officer. She looked small, defeated. "Michael, listen," she began tearfully, her eyes pleading. "We can get past this. It didn't mean anything. Bill is okay, just a mild concussion. He won't press charges." I stared at her, disbelief washing over me. "You think that's what I'm worried about right now? Charges? Sarah, you destroyed everything we had." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "It was a mistake. I don't love him. I love you. Please, just give me a chance to fix this. Forget it ever happened." I shook my head slowly, a deep sadness settling in. "That's the thing, Sarah. I can't forget, and I shouldn't have to." "Michael," she pleaded. "I'm filing for divorce," I said firmly, my voice low, steady, despite the pain. "This isn't a mistake you can fix with words. It's over." She collapsed into a chair, sobbing openly, but her tears couldn't soften me this time. The trust I'd given her so freely had been shattered beyond repair. As the officer led her away, I leaned back, eyes closed, feeling strangely relieved despite the ache in my chest. This wasn't the life I'd wanted, but it was the reality I faced. My marriage was over, my ideals broken. But in the midst of the devastation, I realized I was finally seeing clearly again. It hurt like hell, but at least now I knew the truth. Life after the scandal was nothing short of miserable. The first few weeks passed in a blur, meetings with lawyers, endless paperwork, and awkward conversations with friends and family. Our quiet suburban home, once a sanctuary, now felt cold and empty. Sarah refused to accept that our marriage was over. Every day brought new calls, voicemails, texts her voice breaking, pleading for forgiveness, promising change. Her desperation tore at me, awakening emotions I thought I'd buried beneath anger. One evening, as I sat alone eating reheated pizza in the living room, headlights flooded the driveway. Peering out, my heart sank. It was Sarah, sitting in her car, staring at the house through teary eyes. I stepped outside reluctantly, the night air crisp and biting. Sarah opened her door, slowly stepping out, eyes swollen and red. "Michael, please," she began softly, approaching cautiously. "I need you to hear me out." I crossed my arms defensively. "Sarah, we've been over this. There's nothing left to say." She drew closer, her voice trembling. "I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But our marriage deserves another chance. I made a horrible mistake. I've hurt you. I see that now. Please, Michael, just one chance." Her words tugged painfully at my heart. I wanted desperately to believe her to rewind time and erase the betrayal, but the memories wouldn't fade. "Sarah, every time I look at you, I see him," I whispered bitterly. "I can't just pretend it didn't happen." She reached out hesitantly, placing a gentle hand on my arm. Her touch, once comforting, now felt foreign, painful. "I ended it with Bill immediately," she said quietly. "It meant nothing. It was stupid, impulsive. I let my insecurities control me. You're the only person I've ever truly loved." Her sincerity was clear, but each word felt like salt rubbed into an open wound. "I still love you, Sarah," I admitted, voice cracking. "That's what makes this so damn hard. But how can I trust you again?" She took my hands urgently, tears streaming down her face. We'll rebuild the trust. It'll take time, but please let me try. I promise you I'll spend the rest of my life proving myself." I pulled my hands away gently, shaking my head. "I can't live like that, constantly doubting, questioning your every move. It would tear us apart eventually." Sarah's shoulders slumped in defeat, realizing her words wouldn't sway me. "Is there really no hope, Michael?" The silence between us was heavy, suffocating. I swallowed hard, tears stinging my own eyes. "I wish there was," I said finally, my voice barely audible. "But I can't move past this." She nodded slowly, stepping back toward her car. "I won't stop loving you," she whispered sadly, climbing inside. I stood there motionless as she drove away, the fading taillights disappearing into the darkness. Alone again, I sank onto the porch steps, burying my face in my hands. The ache inside me intensified, a raw wound refusing to heal. Over the following weeks, Sarah continued to appear unexpectedly in grocery stores, at coffee shops, even lingering across the street. Each encounter left me emotionally exhausted, torn between anger and lingering affection. Friends suggested therapy, urging me to find closure. But how could I close a wound that reopened every time I saw her pleading eyes? As time went on, my sadness deepened into depression. Sleepless nights blended into hollow days. I missed Sarah terribly, her laughter, her touch, the simple comfort of sharing my life with someone. But the betrayal hung over me like a dark cloud, poisoning every good memory. One rainy evening, after months of struggle, I finally admitted to myself that I needed a fresh start. The suburb we'd chosen together had become a living reminder of everything I'd lost. Staying here only prolonged my pain. Sitting alone at the kitchen table, divorce papers signed and ready, I made a difficult decision. I would move somewhere far away, where memories couldn't reach me. The next morning, I contacted my employer and requested a transfer. Within days, I'd accepted an offer in Phoenix City, completely unlike Chicago, hot and bright, as far removed from Sarah and my shattered past as possible. Packing my belongings into boxes felt surreal. Every item held memories, photos, gifts, mementos of happier times. Each box, taped shut, felt like sealing away parts of my life, fragments I couldn't yet fully release. On my last night in our house, I walked through each empty room, whispering quiet goodbyes to the life I'd built here. As I stepped outside for the final time, keys in hand, I felt both profound loss and cautious hope. Perhaps in Phoenix, far from Sarah's shadow, I could finally start to heal. But as I climbed into my truck and drove away, I knew deep down that despite everything, despite betrayal, anger, and heartbreak, I still loved her. And that realization was the cruelest pain of all. My new life in Phoenix began quietly. I arrived late on a Friday afternoon, the Arizona sun blazing fiercely above, so different from the chilly winds of Chicago. It was as if I landed in another world, entirely one untouched by memories of Sarah and my failed marriage. I rented a modest single-story house in a quiet neighborhood. The yard was mostly gravel and cactus, a far cry from the lush lawns of the Midwest. But it suited my mood, harsh, empty, uncomplicated. It felt like a blank canvas, somewhere I could rebuild myself from scratch. Settling into a new routine was challenging, but it was exactly what I needed. Work became my sanctuary. Supervising a new project downtown kept my mind occupied, preventing memories from resurfacing too often. In the evenings, though, the silence was difficult to bear. I found myself frequently dialing Elaine's number, reaching out to the one person who understood the full depth of my pain. After everything that had happened with George, she was grieving in her own way, mourning both her marriage and his unexpected death. George's reckless infidelity had finally caught up to him. He'd become entangled with the wrong woman, and a jealous husband's fury had ended in violence. It was tragic, messy, a painful end to a complicated life. Elaine struggled to make sense of it all, haunted by what-ifs and regrets. We spoke regularly, sharing the heavy silence over the phone lines, comforting each other with mutual understanding. Elaine had always been more than just Sarah's mother. She was a true friend, someone who listened without judgment, whose wisdom often guided me through dark moments. "I feel lost, Michael," Elaine confessed softly one evening. "George made so many mistakes, but losing him this way, I don't even know how to mourn. Part of me hates him, but another part misses the man he used to be." "I know exactly what you mean," I admitted quietly. "I still love Sarah despite everything, but the pain overshadows every good memory." Elaine sighed deeply. "Maybe moving away was the right choice for you. Distance can heal wounds better than time alone. She was right. Each day in Phoenix, under that scorching sun, the weight of Chicago's memories seemed a little lighter. The unfamiliar streets, new faces, and relentless heat helped dull the ache inside me. Elaine and I continued checking in daily short calls during my lunch break or longer conversations after work. Gradually, our talks shifted from shared pain to mutual support, even laughter at times. It was comforting, a lifeline that kept us both afloat. Months passed, and my new life took shape. I bought a used motorcycle, something I'd always wanted but never felt free enough to pursue. Riding through the desert highways, wind whipping past, brought a sense of liberation I hadn't felt in years. Yet, despite everything, the fresh start, new job, and newfound freedom something was missing. Loneliness was a constant companion, especially late at night when the city grew quiet and my thoughts grew loud. One evening, after a long motorcycle ride, Elaine called unexpectedly. She sounded hesitant, almost shy. "Michael, I've been thinking," she began softly. "Maybe I could visit you sometime. Chicago holds nothing but painful reminders now, and honestly, I could use a break." Surprised but pleased, I quickly agreed. "Elaine, I'd love for you to come. You deserve a break, and Phoenix might be just what you need." 2 weeks later, she arrived. Seeing her standing in my doorway, suitcase in hand, felt surreal. Her familiar presence, her gentle smile, it felt like home, even here in the desert. During her visit, we explored Phoenix together, visiting museums, enjoying local restaurants, taking scenic drives through desert landscapes. Elaine's laughter echoed frequently, something I hadn't heard in months. Her company eased my loneliness, filling the empty spaces of my new life with warmth and familiarity. One evening, sitting on my patio beneath a brilliant Arizona sunset, Elaine turned to me, her eyes reflecting the fading colors of the sky. "Michael, coming here was the best decision I've made in a long time," she said quietly. "I feel like myself again, like I can breathe." "I'm glad," I replied sincerely. "You deserve to feel happy again. We both do." She reached out, placing a gentle hand on mine. It wasn't romantic, it was a gesture of comfort, understanding, solidarity. Yet, for the first time, a flicker of something deeper stirred inside me. It frightened me at first, this sudden awareness, but also offered a strange sense of peace. Elaine noticed my silence, her expression softening. "I didn't mean to." "No," I interrupted gently, smiling faintly. "I was just thinking how lucky I am to have you here." As twilight deepened, we sat quietly, our fingers lightly intertwined, neither of us needing to speak. In that simple silence, I realized something powerful. We had both been deeply wounded by betrayal, left broken and adrift. But here, together, under the open Arizona sky, we were healing. Our friendship was transforming, becoming something more, something strong enough to withstand whatever storms came next. For the first time since Sarah's betrayal, I felt genuine hope. My past was still painful, but Elaine's presence made my future feel promising again. It was unexpected, complicated, but it was real, and it felt undeniably right. After that first visit, Elaine went back to Chicago, but the house felt emptier than ever without her. I caught myself looking at the chair where she'd sat on the patio, expecting her to be there, smiling faintly at something I'd said. We kept talking every day at first about little things, like the weather or what I was cooking. Then about deeper things, how she'd been feeling since George's death, how I was adjusting to life in Phoenix. And then, one evening, she said it plainly. "Michael, I don't want to be there anymore. Chicago, the house, the people, everything about it just hurts now." "You don't have to stay there," I said before I could think twice. "Come back, stay here, stay as long as you want." There was a pause, and then a quiet, almost relieved. "Are you sure?" "Yes," I told her. "I'm sure." A week later, she was standing in my doorway again, suitcase in hand, and this time it felt natural, like she'd simply come home. At first, we tiptoed around each other, unsure of what this arrangement really meant. We cooked dinner together, we sat outside at night, we watched bad movies, and laughed more than we probably should have. But there was something in the way she looked at me now, and I knew she could see something in me too. One night, after a particularly hot day, we drove out into the desert just to feel the wind on our faces. We parked the truck and climbed onto the hood, watching the stars slowly appear in the vast black sky. "It's beautiful out here," she whispered. I turned to look at her. "It is," I said, though I wasn't looking at the stars anymore. She caught me staring and smiled faintly, almost shyly. "Michael, don't," she said. But her hand found mine anyway. Neither of us spoke. We didn't have to. That quiet, delicate understanding that had always been between us finally became impossible to ignore. Over the next weeks, something shifted. Small things. How she started leaving little notes for me in the kitchen. How I found myself checking the clock at work, eager to get home. One Saturday morning, I woke up to the smell of pancakes. She was in the kitchen, hair tied up, wearing one of my old t-shirts, humming to herself. "Good morning," I said, leaning on the doorway. She looked over her shoulder at me, and something in her eyes, soft but steady, just stopped me cold. "What?" she asked, grinning. "Nothing," I said. But it wasn't nothing. That night, after dinner on the patio, she leaned against my shoulder and said quietly, "You know, I think I've been avoiding this for a long time. How I really feel." "Me too," I admitted, wrapping an arm around her. When she looked up at me, there wasn't any doubt left in either of us. We didn't rush it. That wasn't who we were. But as the days and weeks passed, our friendship blossomed into something fuller, deeper love that had been waiting quietly between us all along. It wasn't perfect. It didn't erase what we'd been through. But sitting there with her hand in mine, watching the Arizona sunset burn gold across the horizon, I realized something. For the first time in years, I was happy. Not because I'd finally forgotten Sarah or stopped hurting, but because I'd stopped running from what I really wanted. Elaine looked at me then, her lips curling into that faint, knowing smile, and whispered, "We deserve this." And I believed her. For the first time in a long, long time, I believed it. It had been months since Elaine moved in, and by then, our quiet little life in Phoenix had settled into something that felt real. We weren't hiding anymore. Friends from work knew about her. The neighbors, too. And even though the situation was unconventional, her being Sarah's mother, it didn't feel wrong. But the past has a way of finding you, no matter how far you run. One Saturday morning, as we were getting ready to drive out to a farmer's market, there was a knock at the door. I froze as soon as I saw her through the window. Sarah. She stood there with her arms crossed, sunglasses perched high on her head, that same sharp determination I'd seen in her the day she begged me not to file the divorce. When I opened the door, she didn't wait for me to speak. "So," she said coolly, eyes darting past me into the house, "it's true, you and my mother." I sighed and stepped outside, closing the door behind me to spare Elaine the confrontation. "Sarah," I started. "No," she cut me off, her voice rising. "Don't Sarah me. You divorced me because I betrayed you, and now you're with her, my mother? How pathetic is that?" Her words didn't sting the way she wanted them to. I'd heard much worse from her before. Still, I kept my voice calm. "What happened between you and me is over," I said firmly. "You made your choices. I made mine." She scoffed, but then her expression darkened, and she leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. "Does she know, Michael? Does my mother know everything about you? Because if I told her a few things I know about how fast you moved on, about the messages I still have, maybe she wouldn't be so quick to play house with you." There it was, the shakedown I'd expected sooner or later. Behind me, I heard the door creak open. Elaine stepped outside, her expression calm, but her eyes steely. "I already know everything," she said quietly, standing beside me. Sarah blinked, thrown off for a second. "Oh, do you?" she sneered. "So you know how he used to say he loved me more than anything? How he begged me to stay? You know about the way he still looked at me even after everything?" Elaine didn't flinch. "Yes," she said plainly. "And yet, here I am, because I also know how much you hurt him, and I see how much he's healed since you've been gone." Sarah's mouth opened, but no words came out. I took a step forward, finally letting my anger show. "Sarah, this stops here. Whatever you came here to say it now, because it's the last time you're showing up at my door." Her jaw tightened. "You think you can just forget me?" "I already have," I replied coldly. For a long moment, she just stood there, breathing hard, her eyes darting between us. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out a folded check one I'd written weeks ago, just in case she showed up like this. "Here," I said, holding it out to her. "It's enough to cover what you lost on the house and a little extra to get yourself together. Take it and go live your life, but don't come back here." She stared at the check, then at me, her lip trembling. "You'll regret this," she whispered bitterly. I shook my head. "No, I won't." Elaine's hand slipped into mine. Finally, Sarah snatched the check, shoved it into her purse, and turned on her heel. She didn't say another word. We watched her car disappear down the street, the dust trailing behind her. Elaine let out a long breath and looked up at me. "You okay?" she asked softly. I nodded slowly. "I am now." And for the first time since the day I caught Sarah in that motel room, I really meant it. After that day on my porch, Sarah disappeared from my life for a while. But word about her still made its way to me, whether I wanted it or not. Through mutual friends, neighbors, even coworkers, I'd hear whispers about her spiraling, bouncing from one affair to another, latching onto married men, wrecking homes like she'd stopped caring who got hurt along the way. It was sad, really. Sadder than angry. She'd always had this restless energy about her, but now it seemed like she'd let it consume her entirely. Then, one cold January morning, I got the call. It was Kate Bill's wife. Through muffled sobs, she said words I'll never forget. "I shot her, Michael. I couldn't take it anymore." Apparently, Sarah had started showing up at Bill and Kate's again, despite everything, despite my warnings, despite their own marriage hanging by a thread. Kate finally broke. She caught them together in her own home, and in a rage she hadn't known she was capable of, she pulled the trigger. I went to the courthouse the day Kate was sentenced. She avoided my eyes, but quietly whispered as she passed me, "I'm sorry. I just couldn't fight her anymore." Sarah's funeral was a quiet, strange affair. Not many people showed up. The woman she'd become in her final years had driven everyone away. Elaine stood beside me the entire time, her hand gripping mine. Neither of us cried, not because we didn't feel anything, but because we'd both already grieved for her long before she was gone. Afterward, standing at her grave, I finally whispered goodbye. Not just to Sarah, but to everything she'd taken from Mimi Peace, my trust, my belief that love had to hurt. That spring, after everything had settled, I sat with Elaine on the back patio of our Phoenix home. The desert sunset stretched wide and golden across the horizon, and she looked at me with a quiet strength I'd come to love so deeply. "Michael," she said softly, "I know we've both been through hell, but I'd marry you tomorrow if you asked." So I did. We kept it simple, a small ceremony in a garden outside town, just close friends and a few family members who still mattered. A year later, we welcomed twin boys. When the nurse placed them in our arms, Elaine laughed through her tears and whispered, "Look at them, our clean slate." We named them Matthew and Daniel, not after anyone, just names that felt like hope. Life wasn't perfect after that. There were hard days, sleepless nights, and quiet moments where the shadows of the past tried to creep back in. But every time I looked at Elaine or felt the weight of one of my sons sleeping on my chest, I knew we'd made it through. Sarah's choices didn't define me anymore, and neither did mine. We'd built something stronger out of the wreckage, something real, something worth protecting. As I stood in the doorway one evening, watching Elaine rock the boys to sleep, I realized I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The past was finally behind me. And for the first time in my life, I understood what it meant to be truly happy.